Welcome back, everyone, to season 4 of the Truth and Freedom podcast, where awakening begins with asking the question most people are afraid to ask. I'm your host, Dr. Danam Zalang, and this is not just another podcast. This is a journey into awareness, courage, and truth. So, we all live in a world that celebrates intelligence loudly and practice emotional intelligence quietly, if at all. Degrees, credentials, opinion, and information are everywhere. But emotional intelligence, which is the ability to recognize, regulate, and responsibly express what you feel while staying attuned to others, is still surprisingly rare. Even among people who are highly educated, well spoken, and intellectually impressive, emotional immaturity often hides in plain sight. Intellects can explain emotion, emotional intelligence can hold them, and those are not the same skill. You can articulate your trauma, analyze your triggers, debate psychology, and still react impulsively, shut down under pressure, or externalize blame when discomfort arises. Knowledge without regulation creates confidence without stability, and that combination often causes more harm than ignorance ever did. Most people were taught how to think, not how to feel. Logic was rewarded, sensitivity was corrected. Emotional expression was either dismissed or dramatized. So many adults grew up fluent in ideas but illiterate in emotions. They learn how to argue, persuade, and justify, but not how to pause, self-soothe, or repair. Education trained the mind. No one trained the nervous system. So that is why emotional intelligence feels invisible until it's missing. You notice it when conversation escalate instead of resolve, when defensiveness replaces curiosity, when disagreement turns personal, when someone needs to be right more than they need to be connected. Intelligence can win debates. Emotional intelligence preserves relationships. At the Truth and Freedom podcast, we don't confuse insight with maturity. We talk about capacity, the capacity to stay present when emotion arises, to tolerate discomfort without collapsing or controlling, to hear feedback without tuning in into threat. Emotional intelligence isn't about being calm all the time. It's about being aware enough to choose how to respond rather than letting reaction choose for you. Engaged listeners here already sense the difference. You've likely encountered people who sound wise but feel unsafe, who talk about growth but can't tolerate accountability, who knows all the right language but avoid the work on regulation. And you probably noticed that the most grounded people in your life aren't always the loudest or more articulate. They're the most steady. They listen, they repair, they don't need to dominate a conversation to feel secure. Emotional intelligence requires humility. It asks you to admit when you're activated, when you don't know, and when you're wrong. And humility doesn't come from intelligence. It comes from self-awareness, from being willing to see how your behavior impacts others, not just how justified it feels internally. So this podcast exists to cultivate that kind of awareness, not to make you smarter, but to make you more integrated. Because freedom doesn't come from having the right answers. It comes from having the internal ability to face hard conversation, conflicting emotions, and uncomfortable truth without losing yourself. When emotional intelligence is practiced, relationships change. Conflict becomes informative instead of destructive. Boundaries become clear instead of punitive. Communication becomes direct instead of defensive. And self-trust deepens because you know you can handle what arises inside you. So if you ever felt out of place in conversations that prioritize cleverness over connection, know this. You are not behind. You're developing a different kind of intelligence, one that doesn't perform, dominate, or impress, but one that stabilizes, clarifies, and connects. Stay here. Stay curious about your inner world. Stay committed to regulation over reaction, presence over performance, and truth over ego. Because emotional intelligence may be rare, but it's the foundation of real freedom. I'd like to thank you all for joining me on this episode of Why Emotional Intelligence is Rare, even among educated people. So in our next episode, we will cover the why freedom scares people more than control, even when living in a society where having control is more rampant than being free. This is certainly an episode you do not want to miss. Until then, my friend, stay awake, stay grounded, and stay free.